Mhm. My name is Claire, and at my father's 25th anniversary gala for Whitmore Capital, my place card at the family table didn't have my name. It had a title, The One Who Didn't Inherit the Gift. I stood there in the middle of the ballroom holding a glass of sparkling water I hadn't asked for, reading those 6 words over and over until they stopped feeling like words and started feeling like a verdict. Around me, 300 of Chicago's most important people laughed and clinked glasses and pretended not to notice the daughter standing very still at the edge of her own family's celebration. My sister noticed. She was watching from across the room with that small, practiced smile she'd been perfecting since we were teenagers. My stepmother was beside her, one hand resting lightly on my sister's arm, the picture of grace and composure. Neither of them moved toward me. Neither of them looked away. I set the place card down, face up, exactly where I found it. I had almost not come. When the invitation arrived at my apartment 6 weeks ago, thick cream paper, gold-embossed lettering, the Whitmore crest in the corner, I held it over the trash can for a full minute before my friend Renata called. "Just go," she said. "Let them see you're not hiding." So I had pressed my black dress, done my hair, and driven 40 minutes to a hotel ballroom I'd been inside 100 times, telling myself the whole way that I was doing this for me. Not for my father, not to prove anything, just to stand in a room and refuse to shrink. That was before I saw the place card. I exhaled slowly and reminded myself, not here, not now. If I reacted, I became the problem. That was how it always worked in this family. My father would look disappointed. My stepmother would tilt her head with that expression of patient suffering she wore like jewelry. My sister would laugh, not loudly, just enough. And I would be the one who made a scene at the anniversary gala. I would be once again the one who didn't know how to behave. So I smoothed my expression into something neutral and walked deeper into the room. The ballroom was everything my father loved, understated opulence, nothing flashy, every detail chosen to signal old money rather than new ambition. Round tables draped in ivory linen, centerpieces of white orchids, a string quartet in the corner playing something I almost recognized. My father stood near the bar surrounded by a cluster of investors and board members, his silver hair perfectly combed, his hand moving through the air as he made some point that apparently delighted everyone within arm's reach. He was good at that. He had always been extraordinary at making rooms fall in love with him. He saw me. I know he did, because his eyes moved across my face for exactly 1 second before returning to the man beside him without any change of expression at all. I kept walking. I found the balcony through a side door near the coat check, and I stood in the cold November air and let myself breathe. The city spread out below in grids of light. I had grown up in this city. I had learned to ride a bike in Lincoln Park 2 miles from here. I had eaten Sunday dinners 20 minutes north until I was 16 years old, until my mother got sick and my father started working longer hours and then longer still, until the house started feeling like a waiting room for something none of us wanted to name, until she died. And then everything rearranged itself into a shape I didn't recognize, and my father remarried 14 months later, and I became, gradually, and then all at once, the one who didn't quite fit. I heard the door open behind me. "You're not going to make a scene, are you?" My sister's voice was light, almost amused. I didn't turn around. "I haven't decided yet." She came to stand beside me at the railing. She was wearing a dress that cost more than my monthly rent, her dark hair pinned up in the way our stepmother had been showing her since she was 15. She looked elegant. She looked like she belonged to this world completely and had never once wondered if she did. "The place card was a joke," she said. "You're so sensitive." "A joke requires someone to be laughing," I said. I wasn't laughing. She picked up a piece of lint from her sleeve and dropped it over the railing. "Dad's going to make the announcement tonight about the succession plan." She paused. "I thought you should know before he does it publicly." I turned to look at her then. Her expression didn't change. "It's official. I'm taking over as managing director when he steps down next year. My name goes on the building." A pause. Smaller this time. "I thought you'd rather hear it from me." I held her gaze and said nothing because there was nothing to say that wouldn't give her exactly what she wanted. After a moment, she went back inside. I stayed on the balcony for another 2 minutes. Then I followed her in. The thing about being the daughter who doesn't fit is that you develop certain habits of observation. You learn to watch the room instead of performing for it. You notice which conversations stop when you approach and which continue. You see which eyes find you and how long they linger. I had been doing this since I was 17 years old, and by now it was as automatic as breathing, which is why, when I passed the hallway near the private dining rooms, I noticed the man. He was older, mid-60s, the kind of man who had made and lost several fortunes and wore both experiences visibly. He was speaking quietly to another man I didn't recognize, and most people would have passed without registering a word. But I had spent my whole life listening at the edges of rooms, and I heard him clearly. Always wondered what really happened with the first wife, the timing of it all. The second man said something too low for me to catch. The first man shook his head. All I know is what Marcus told me back in 2009. He said there were papers she never got to sign, that things were moved before anyone knew she was that sick. He shook his head again. None of my business now. Ancient history. They moved away. I stood very still in the middle of the hallway. Papers she never got to sign. My mother had been an architect. Before she married my father, before I was born, she had built something. A small firm, 3 employees, a reputation for residential design that was starting to attract real attention. When she married my father and I arrived, she folded the firm into a partnership arrangement with Whitmore Capital's real estate division. A collaboration, my father always called it, a merging of their professional lives to match their personal ones. He had always made it sound romantic. She died when I was 16. I had never thought to question what happened to her firm, to her designs, to her intellectual property, to whatever arrangements they had made in writing. I had been 16 and grieving. I had not thought to question anything at all. I thought about it now. I moved down the hall, past the dining rooms, deeper into the private wing of the hotel. Whitmore Capital hosted all its major events here. They had a standing arrangement with the management, a suite of rooms that functioned almost like a satellite office during big evenings. I had been in these rooms before, as a child, waiting on a couch with a book, while my father finished meetings that always ran long. His private office for the evening was the third door on the left. I knew without checking because I knew him, because I knew how he moved through spaces, because I had spent years studying the architecture of his preferences. The door was not locked. It was slightly open, the way doors get when someone passes through quickly and doesn't quite pull them shut. I should have kept walking. I went in. The room smelled like cedar and the same cologne he had worn my entire life. A briefcase sat open on the desk, papers arranged in neat stacks, a laptop closed beside them. Everything precise. Everything controlled. My father's workspaces always looked like this, like evidence that chaos could be refused if you were disciplined enough. I scanned the desk without touching anything. Board resolutions, quarterly reports. A folder labeled anniversary remarks with handwritten notes in the margin. None of it was what I was looking for, and I wasn't entirely sure what I was looking for until I saw the accordion file on the credenza behind the desk. It was old, worn at the corners, a rubber band holding it closed that had gone brittle with age. On the tab, in my father's handwriting, Elaine, closed. Elaine was my mother's name. I picked it up. The rubber band snapped the moment I touched it. Inside, documents, letters, and at the very back, tucked behind a set of legal correspondence, a sealed envelope with my name written on the front and handwriting I recognized from birthday cards I had kept in a shoebox under my bed for 14 years. My mother's handwriting. My hands were not steady when I opened it. Claire, she had written. If you are reading this, it means the lawyers found a way. I am writing this in October and I don't know how much time I have left, but I need you to understand something that I may not be able to tell you in person. When your father and I merged my firm into Whitmore Capital, I retained intellectual property rights to all designs and architectural work produced before the partnership agreement. This was in the contract. What was not in the contract, what was added to an amended version I never saw until it was too late, was a clause transferring those rights permanently to Whitmore Capital upon my death or incapacitation. I did not agree to this. I did not sign this version. I have been trying to reach the attorney who handled the amendment, and I have been redirected every time. I am not telling you this to make you angry. I am telling you this so that you know the Whitmore Tower, the residential division, the design portfolio your father has been using to secure investors for 15 years. A significant portion of it is built on my work. My name was never on it. I want you to know it existed. I love you more than anything I have ever built. Take care of yourself, baby. Don't let them make you small. I read it twice. Then I folded it carefully and put it in my bag. That's not yours. I turned. My sister was standing in the doorway. Her expression was different now, not amused, not cool, careful in the way a person looks when they've suddenly realized the ground might not be solid. How long have you known? I asked. Known what? But her voice was wrong. About the amendment. About what he did to her work. A pause. I don't know what you're talking about. You were in this room earlier. I looked at the briefcase at the angle of the papers. The door was open because you were here. You came back to make sure I hadn't found it. I watched her face. You already knew. She stepped into the room and pulled the door shut behind her. Claire, listen to me. Her voice dropped. This is not the night to do whatever you're thinking about doing. When is the night? There is no night. There's no version of this where you win anything. She came closer, and for a second she looked tired in a way I hadn't seen before, underneath the composure. Whatever was in that letter, whatever you think you found, the legal window closed years ago. She's gone. Nothing changes. It changes what I know, I said. It changes what I can prove. She looked at me for a long time. He will destroy you, she said quietly. He has done it before. He's been doing it for years, I said. He just hasn't noticed I've been paying attention. I walked past her, back down the hallway, back into the sound of the string quartet and the crystal glasses and 300 people who had no idea what was happening at the edges of the room they were standing in. I found Renata where I had texted her to meet me, near the entrance, coat already in hand. She looked at my face and asked no questions, just handed me my coat and walked with me out into the cold. In the car, I told her everything. I expected her to tell me to think carefully, to wait, to consider the consequences. Instead, she was quiet for a moment and then said, I have a contact, an investigative journalist. She's been circling Whitmore Capital for 2 years, and she cannot get anyone on the inside to talk. She looked at me. She would want to see that letter. I looked down in my bag. Not yet, I said. First I need to know how deep it goes. It took me 11 days. I still had access to my mother's online storage accounts. She had set them up before the internet was sophisticated enough for a dying person to think about who would inherit their digital life. I had the passwords in a notebook she gave me when I was 15. I had never opened the accounts because I had been afraid of what it would feel like. I opened them now. 3.5 gigabytes of architectural drawings, correspondence, contract drafts, and notes. And near the bottom of a folder labeled Whitmore Partnership, Keep, a scanned copy of the original contract signed by both my parents with her intellectual property rights clearly outlined, and then scanned separately and labeled Do Not Signed. Amended version, the document she had referenced in her letter. The differences were not subtle once you knew to look for them. Someone had removed 3 clauses and added 1. The added clause was half a page long and would not have survived a contested reading. But she had been sick and the attorneys had been his attorneys, and she had run out of time. I also found something she hadn't mentioned in the letter, because I don't think she knew it existed yet. A chain of internal emails, forwarded to her by someone sympathetic inside the firm, never responded to, that showed my father had been using her design portfolio to secure a federal historic preservation grant, not once, 17 times, over 12 years. Each application listed Whitmore Capital as the sole originating firm, not a single one mentioned her name. I sat at my kitchen table at 2 a.m. and looked at the numbers. $11.3 million in federal grants, anchored substantially by designs my mother had produced before anyone had amended anything. I called Renata. Tell your contact, I said, that I'm ready to talk. I did not hear from my father directly until 8 days after the journalist's first email went to Whitmore Capital's PR team. The email had asked specific questions about the intellectual property amendment and the federal grant applications. It had not yet been published. It had simply been sent as a professional courtesy before publication. My father's response was a car, specifically a town car outside my building at 7 in the morning with a note asking me to come to his office at 9 o'clock. I arrived at 9 exactly. His office occupied the top floor of the building he had built using, among other things, my mother's designs. Floor-to-ceiling glass. The city below. He was standing when I came in, which meant he had decided to make this a standing conversation, which meant he felt the need to manage the power in the room. I had been watching him make these calculations my whole life. "Sit down," he said. "I'm fine standing." His jaw moved once. "Claire, I understand you've been having some conversations that could damage this family considerably. I've been answering a journalist's questions," I said, factually. He walked to his desk and placed a folder in front of the chair across from him. "I would like to discuss a settlement. A meaningful one. Enough for you to do whatever you want, travel, start something new, whatever would make you happy." A pause. "This is a private family matter. It doesn't need to become public." I looked at the folder but didn't open it. "What my mother built," I said, "was not a family matter. It was her work. She spent years on it, and you put her name on nothing. She was my wife. What was hers, I said. "That's what the contract said. The first contract. The one she actually signed." His expression didn't break, but something behind it shifted. He was recalculating. He had expected me to be uncomfortable, maybe tearful, maybe willing to negotiate towards something small and quiet. He was understanding now that I had not come to negotiate. I pushed the folder back toward him. "I don't want your money," I said. "I want her name on the record. The grants, the portfolio, the residential division, I want her credited for the work she actually did, publicly, in whatever form your attorneys and the grant agencies require." "That is not something I'm willing to." "Then the article publishes on Thursday," I said, "with the scanned documents and the grant application numbers and the emails, your choice." The silence in the room was the longest of my life. He sat down slowly. He looked at the folder. He looked at the window. He looked like a man who had spent 30 years controlling the story of his own life and had just understood that someone had finally found the actual documents. "I'll need time," he said finally, quietly. "You have until Wednesday," I said, "to call the journalist yourself and agree to a corrected record. If she hears from you first, she'll write a different kind of story." I picked up my bag. "She deserved better than what you gave her," I said, and so did I. I walked out of his office. I did not look back. The story, when it ran, was not the story I had originally thought it would be. My father called the journalist on Tuesday afternoon. His attorneys and hers spent most of Wednesday in conversation. What was published on Thursday was a carefully reported piece about the history of the Whitmore residential portfolio, including a full credit restoration for my mother's work, a commitment from Whitmore Capital to formally amend all grant records with the relevant federal agencies, and a statement from my father that used the word oversight 4 times, which was not the word I would have chosen but was close enough to the truth that I did not contest it. He did not call me. My sister did, the evening the article ran. She didn't apologize. She said, "I hope you're satisfied," in a voice that had none of its usual smoothness, and I said that I was, and she hung up. Renata came over that night with wine and the kind of takeout that arrives in too many containers. We sat on my kitchen floor because the couch felt too formal for the occasion, and we ate dumplings and read the article on my laptop and said very little. "Your mom would have loved this," Renata said eventually. I thought about the letter in my bag, the one I had read probably 40 times in the past 3 weeks. I thought about my mother sitting in a hospital room in October, sick and running out of time, writing something she didn't know if I'd ever find, trying to reach me across the years in whatever way she had left. "Yeah," I said, "she would have." Later that night, I sat at my desk and opened the shoebox from under my bed. Birthday cards, report cards, a drawing I had made for her when I was 7, a photograph from a trip to California when I was 12. At the very back, a program from a building dedication ceremony, one of her early projects, a residential complex in Evanston that still stood. Her name was printed in the program under lead designer. It was the only place I had ever seen her credited in print. I put the letter beside the program. I thought about what she had written at the end. Don't let them make you small. I had spent a long time being made small. Not all at once. That's not how it happens. It happens gradually, through 100 small moments where you choose not to react, where you absorb the dismissal and the place cards and the conversations that stop when you enter the room. Until one day, you realize you have been choosing smallness so long, it has started to feel like your natural size. I was 31 years old and I was done. If you're watching this and you've spent years feeling like the wrong fit in your own family, like you carry something they named without your permission, I want you to hear this. The name they gave you is not the final word. You are allowed to find the documents. You are allowed to ask the questions. You are allowed to walk into the room they didn't invite you to and put the evidence on the table. Sometimes the bravest thing is not fighting loudly. It's simply refusing to let the record stand uncorrected. My mother built something real and her name was taken off it. Now it's back. That's not everything. It's not the years, it's not the Sunday dinners I didn't have, it's not the person I might have been if things had gone differently. But it's something. It's the truth, written down, where people can see it. And if you have ever been in a room where someone put a name on you that wasn't yours, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. Tell me where you're watching from. Tell me how you fought back or how you're still figuring out how to. I read everyone. If this story stayed with you, hit subscribe. There are more coming. And until then, take care of yourself. You've earned it. I kept my mother's letter in my bag for 11 days before I did anything with it. Not because I was afraid, though I was, but because I needed to understand something first. I needed to understand how we had gotten here. Not just my father, not just the amended contract, but all of it. The years of Sunday dinners that got quieter after she died. The way my name slowly stopped appearing in conversations about the company's future. The place card at a gala that was, in some ways, the most honest thing my family had said to me in 15 years. Here's what I've come to believe. The people who try to erase you are rarely acting out of strength. They're acting out of fear. My father took my mother's name off her work because her talent made something visible about their partnership that he didn't want examined. He spent years building a story about Whitmore Capital as his creation, his vision, his legacy, and her designs were evidence that the story had a co-author. Erasure wasn't cruelty for its own sake, it was self-protection. Understanding that didn't excuse it, but it helped me see clearly, and clarity is everything when you're deciding how to move. What changed things for me wasn't anger. Anger had been available my whole life, and it had never opened a single door. What changed things was patience, the kind that comes from deciding you are worth the effort of being precise. I spent 11 days reading documents, cross-referencing files, building a case that couldn't be dismissed or reframed or explained away, with a family's favorite word, complicated. Every hour I put into that work was an act of respect, for myself, for her, for the idea that the truth deserves the same quality of effort that was put into burying it. Intelligence, real intelligence, is not about being the smartest person in the room. It's about being the most honest one. My father was brilliant at many things, and one of them was constructing a version of events that served him. I had to be willing to construct a version that served the facts instead. Those are different skills, and only one of them holds up when the documents are on the table. The resilience part. The part where you walk into your father's office on the top floor of a building your mother helped design and you refuse the money and say what you actually mean. That doesn't come from nowhere. It's built, slowly, out of every moment you chose not to disappear when someone suggested you should. Every time you stayed in the room. Every time you paid attention instead of pretending not to notice. Claire didn't become someone who could do that in a single night. She became that person over years of absorbing where her family was, seeing it clearly and deciding she didn't have to become it. The place card called her the one who didn't inherit the gift. What they didn't understand was that she had. She just inherited it from her mother, and it wasn't the kind that gets transferred in a boardroom. It was the kind that gets passed through letters kept in shoeboxes, through design programs saved on old hard drives, through the simple, stubborn act of one woman writing down the truth before she ran out of time. And her daughter, years later, finally reading it. What you build on honesty lasts. What you build on silence and amended contracts eventually requires a room full of lawyers and a journalist's questions to hold together. The outcome was never really in doubt. It just took someone patient enough to find the file.